Welcome to Mocktails and Masterpieces with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, sponsored by Anthony Shefferly and Associates.
Greetings, everyone. Matthew Kramer here, looking forward to another program this week with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. Thank you for joining this Mocktails and Masterpieces. We are delighted to be joined by our good friend, Reinaldo Moya. Reinaldo, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you again, Matthew. Thanks again.
We are thrilled to have a world premiere of one of your works on this concert. The program is titled Celebrating Mother Earth. It's over 2 years in the making, another product of a COVID shutdown in the 2020-21 season. We're thrilled that this program is just this weekend. And the concept of this, again, in nature and music is nothing new, but we began conversations about commissioning you for a work almost immediately after we first met you several years ago when we performed your Passacaglia, just ways that we could bring you back and write something specifically tailored for the chamber orchestra. And thematic programming is a big thing that we do here. And so when we came on this idea of deforestation in the Amazon, climate change, it sounded like something that was really close to your heart, being a native of Venezuela and sharing close borders and parts of the forest within your country. So before we talk about the piece that you completed some time ago and it's getting its world premiere performance this weekend, let's talk a little bit about you and how busy you are now. It just seems that every time I look at your schedule, you're zipping around the country for premieres. Tell us some of the things that have been happening with your compositions and performances lately.
Yeah, so about a month ago or so, I was over in Bangor, Maine, hanging out with the folks at the Bangor Symphony and Joyce Yang, the pianist, and we premiered my piano concerto over there. And then I was at the San Diego Symphony a couple of days before that with a performance of another orchestral work. And so, yeah, no, I'm very excited to be doing this much, especially after all of the stops and cancellations and delays of the COVID. It's been a wonderful opportunity to come back and make music in this way. So I'm just delighted, and I hope that I can continue to share my music as widely as I've been able to in the last little bit.
Can I talk to you a little bit about what the last 19 months have been like as a composer? You're used to working in solitude anyways. I wonder, has the shutdown, but then the previous months that followed, since so few performances, especially live performances, were being given, were you able to utilize that time more productively or more creatively, or how much were you writing during all of this?
I read a lot, and I think that the shutdown was good for me creatively because, like you said, I mean, I wasn't traveling, I was home, especially in the summer, and then most of last year, all of last year, I was working from home, teaching from home, and I wasn't driving, and so yeah, I feel like I was able to sit down and devote more time to writing, to think more deeply about the writing, to answer the questions to myself about what I really want a piece like our piece to be like. I feel like if I hadn't had that slowdown before I started working on the piece for the orchestra here, I don't think I would have written the kind of music that I did. I think it's a more introspective music, even though it doesn't necessarily sound like introspective music. It's kind of a boisterous, fun piece. I do feel the kinds of questions that I was asking of myself as I was writing it were aided by having a little bit more time to think about the things, and then also having had the time in between the moment that I finished it and the premiere I've had an opportunity to sit back and reflect on the piece more in the intervening year or so after I finished it.
Let's talk a little bit about the creative process, though. When we had this conversation, I hadn't really even paid much attention to COVID in the world at the time. It was well before the alarms were sounding in this country. So we, of course, thought the brush fires in Australia were major headline news, and of course the deforestation was all over the front pages right before COVID rocked this country and the entire world. But we started this conversation about doing a multimedia piece, bringing in Mike Hallerz, a friend of the orchestra who's done videography for us before, and combining these elements of music and visual aspects. Where did you take this? As soon as we were having conversations about deforestation, climate change, what's the next step for you as a composer? How did you let this germinate? You knew you needed about 10 to 15 minutes of music, a thematically driven work. How did the wheel start turning?
I can't remember exactly what the spark was. I think we had the early conversations about 2 years ago, right around this time in the fall of 2019, and I didn't actually sit down to start writing the piece until the summer of last year of 2020. So some months went in between that time, and I think I'm a big believer in kind of you're still doing that work in there. The subconscious is working. As I was having early conversations with Mike, because we talked very often during that time as I was starting the work, we were asking lots of questions and thinking of a lot of things. And then I think that the final piece for me was coming across this book, 1491 by Charles Mann, that the whole premise of the book is looking at the world of the Americas before the arrival of Columbus and kind of debunking a lot of the myths about what life in the Americas was before that moment. And there's a whole chapter about the Amazon and how the Amazon was largely shaped by human activity. That we have this image of the Amazon as this pristine, untouched, pure environment, and in reality, for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's been the direct result of human activity, and the kind of biodiversity that we find there, and especially the agriculture and the industry of that whole area was driven by early humans from a very, very, very early time. And so I think that book was really that final piece. I can't remember if I read the book because I was thinking about the Amazon or one of those serendipitous encounters, but it really did kind of bring it all together for me. And I think that aspect of the idea of the human relationship to the Amazon was central to my thinking of the piece.
And did this book then help lead you towards naming your work?
Yeah, for sure. So right, the working title for the piece was Anthropogenic Amazon, which is the name of the anthropological theory that posits that basically what I just said, that the Amazon as we know it today is a direct result of human activity, right, for hundreds of years, even before the arrival of Columbus. We decided against such a mouthful of a name, and so we went with the title Dark Earth, which refers to this very fertile dirt that is found in the Amazon that is the direct result of the slash and burn agriculture that was so common in back in the day, right? That it contains a lot of ash, and there is a lot of carbon remains from the other organic matter that has been kind of processed in that way. So we think of the Amazon as this incredibly fertile land, and it is that, and it's largely or at least partly due to this human activity of creating this special dark earth through the slash and burn agriculture.
Could you tell us a little bit about your use of folk music in this piece?
Yeah, so to me, like I said, the idea of having this piece be really about the relationship between humans and the environment, right? And how closely the two have been intertwined for millennia, really. And so it made sense to me to bring aspects of that relationship. So what I do is I translated some of the cultures around the Amazon musically, right? So we have it's all invented folk music. They're all of the tunes are my own. I'm not really deriving folk music. I'm not like arranging folk music that already exists. I'm just kind of taking some of those sounds. And rather than looking for like indigenous music, because I think that could be a whole other rabbit hole, fascinating one, but for some reason my brain went to a little bit more recent music. I went instead with sort of popular music instead of folk music, instead of indigenous music. So I chose finally 3 types of music from the different countries around the Amazon, one of which is from Brazil, of course. I chose music from northern Brazil, the music of the berimbau, which is a folk instrument that is associated with capoeira and the beautiful martial arts from Brazil, that features this very particular instrument, the berimbau, which is somewhere between a violin and erhu with a string, but there's a strong percussive aspect to it as well. So there's music from Brazil, there's music from southern Venezuela, from El Callao, which is that section that borders with Brazil. And this is a fascinating style of music. It's called Calypso del Callao, which comes from down there, but it has definite aspects of Caribbean music that somehow penetrated into the inland and all the way into the Amazon basin. So you'll hear something that sounds a little bit like from Trinidad, because that's kind of where that music comes from. And then the last music that you hear is what was dubbed chicha music, right? It's from the Peruvian Amazon. That it's a kind of cumbia that became very common in the 1950s and 60s. So it has the very characteristic dance rhythm of the cumbia, the dun, 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 that kind of thing. And so I represent the cultures around the Amazon musically in that way, right? And it's about the relationship of those dances and those melodies and those instruments, and each one of those dances is presented musically in a kind of straightforward way first, and then you start to see these things distorted in other ways, rhythmically, melodically, harmonically. I start to kind of put them off kilter a little bit. And then the climax of the piece is all of these things kind of coming together, and then there's a big moment where it all kind of seems to fall apart. There's a big climactic point. And that's, I reckon, I sort of compare that a little bit to our current moment, right? Like where our human activity and the activity of and the environment around us are at odds with each other. And when I was talking with Mike about the origin of the piece, we were pretty adamant that we didn't want this piece to just be a downer, right? Like where the piece ends and you're like, well, it's all doom. What can we do? There's nothing we can do. It's too late to do anything about anything, right? Like, and so that after this climactic point, there is a kind of a call to action, right? I devised this kind of chorale texture that emerges out of that climax as a way of kind of bringing all of these together. And to me, a chorale has those kinds of religious connotations about it, and almost like a prayer, a call to action to come together and do something about this situation.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that interaction between you and Mike. You were commissioned to write a work really by yourself. You would do all of the work in your studio, in your office, at home, but this involved conversations with another person who was contributing to this project. Well, how do these conversations influence you, and how did it influence Mike, and how this piece took shape?
Yeah, no, we were talking every week for a long time, and early on in the process, as we were really devising the shape of this thing, what it was going to look like, what it was going to sound like, Mike and I were together, really working as one. Then I went off and I wrote my music because I kind of needed to do that at some point. Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, after the pandemic, we haven't, or since those initial stages, we haven't been in touch quite as much. But I've been letting him do his work, and then it's been nice to come together again and see what some of the things that he's been coming up with. But it was very, very intense, very closely together at the beginning. And we started out really, really big picture, and then it started to zero in on the things that we felt were important for this piece, and the kind of vision that we wanted to tell and the kind of story we wanted to tell. Because this piece could have gone in so many different directions, and I think it was important for us to have those early conversations to come together to a shared vision for this.
Well, we're thrilled that it's finally here. Like I mentioned at the beginning, a long time in coming here, presenting Reinaldo Moya's Dark Earth on a program celebrating nature. Celebrate Mother Earth is what we're calling it. We open with your work, followed by Radovara's Cantus Arcticus, which is a work, Finnish composer, were based on recorded bird song in the Arctic. And then on the second half, we have what is perhaps the first work, a programmatic work about nature, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, one of those iconic works with a marvelous violinist named Richard Lynn, who you'll recall, if those of you tuning in, won the gold medal at the 2018 violin competition of Indianapolis. We've been trying to get Richard for a long time. He lives in Taiwan, and of course, travel is so difficult, but he'll be here performing Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Reinaldo, thank you so much for your art, for contributing this piece, which I've just enjoyed immensely studying. I can't wait for this weekend to get here so we have the opportunity to perform it. But thanks also for spending a little bit of time here with us discussing Dark Earth, and we'll look forward to seeing you this weekend when we perform it live at the Schrott. Thanks, Reinaldo.
Thanks for having me. I'm also super excited to come together and share this piece with all of you. So thank you for tuning in.
If you don't have tickets, jump on the ICO's website or Facebook page. We look forward to welcoming all of you for this weekend's performance. Thank you.